Nerdrotic.com.
My fellow Tolkien fans and lovers of all things good, let's take a victory lap, shall we? It turns out you weren't taking crazy pills, you weren't losing your grasp on reality, and your eyes were not being deceived. No, that was Amazon's job, to deceive you and themselves. Because a couple of days ago, we got confirmation of what we knew all along. The Rings of Power was a massive flop, a total catastrophe for Amazon, and dare I say, and allow me to indulge myself because I'm going to use the title of a video I put out a year before this show came out. The Rings of Power was a giant global disaster. Only 37% of US The Rings of Power viewers finished season 1. Report. Amazon has previously called the show its top original, but now we know that's a complete lie, having been viewed by over 100 million people worldwide, according to Amazon. So if they only retained 37%, that means they lost 63%. That is 2/3 of their audience. In the United States, only 37% of viewers who started The Rings of Power actually watched all 8 episodes to completion, and again, I think that number's a little high. According to a new report from The Hollywood Reporter, the number was not shared directly from Amazon, but reportedly came from sources within the organization who are still working for Amazon and under Jennifer Salk. Overseas, the completion rate was significantly better, but at 45%, less than half of all viewers were compelled to complete Amazon's Middle-earth adventure, and it's all about that completion rate. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Am I right, ladies? Since its premiere last September, on the anniversary of Professor Tolkien's death, The Rings of Power has been proudly branded a hit by Amazon. Prime Video proclaimed that the fantasy series premiere day broke records for the streamer, with 25 million viewers tuning in, which again we know is complete BS. As of March, Amazon has been calling it their biggest show ever, with over 100 million people worldwide having watched the series. But streaming ratings are always nebulous, and a new report is calling the show's success into question. Well, shucks, it looks like you can't take a billion-dollar corporation's word at face value. Admittedly, it's hard to say for certain how these completion rates compare to other shows at Amazon or otherwise. The streamers that do release viewership metrics never share completion rates for their titles. And you want to know why? Because they're extremely low, just like all the other numbers, or they would be proud to share them like Netflix is with Stranger Things, the same show that The Rings of Power had to equal in success, according to my sources, and obviously didn't. So success is measured by the raw amount of hours audiences watch the show, even if only a few tuned in for 2 minutes. That said, according to the Hollywood Reporter's story, insiders at Amazon claimed a 50% completion rate would be viewed as a solid but not spectacular result for an original. So according to streamers, losing half of your audience is solid but not spectacular. This is the point in the video where I point out that every time Amazon posted anything on YouTube, it got ratioed into oblivion with some of the most clever and brilliant trolling I've ever seen in the comment section. That actually started a trend on YouTube. I also want to point out that the Superfans video for the UK was pulled, and in that video,
Enhanced 34 to 36.
they actually showed a guy pissing in the corner at their trailer premiere, which should have been a portent for things to come. And my favorite part, one of the super fans, who was my girl Galadriel, ended up blowing off the Rings of Power for the House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon started first, so I was already taken.
Amazon also flew out some Tolkien influencers, including the Professor, out to the UK, who gave us glowing reviews, and a couple of them, much later, decided to come out with their honest review. Deleted reviews on Amazon Prime, deleted reviews on IMDb, which Amazon owns, you know the rest. But while the show managed to make it to number 15 on Nielsen's end-of-year list of top streaming original shows, but not top streaming shows, it also had a slightly muted reaction from audiences on social media. Au contraire, it did not, but we'll get to that in just a moment. It was completely overshadowed by House of the Dragon, which attracted significantly more online conversation, according to Parrot Analytics, which just uses an algorithm to judge how many people are talking about a show across all the platforms. It doesn't really discern between good or bad. The show was largely ignored by award bodies this year. House of the Dragon, meanwhile, managed a Golden Globe win for Best Drama Series. You know, it's hilarious. Nobody cares about award shows outside of Hollywood, and award shows don't care about the Rings of Power. The revelation of the Rings of Power completion rate comes as a part of a broader story from The Hollywood Reporter, and it is a tome, but we will go over it, about Amazon Studios' struggle to produce a breakout-defining hit for the Prime Video streamer. Sources quoted in the story shared frustrations regarding perceived poor decision-making and a lack of vision from the studio head, Jennifer Salk, and head of television, Vernon Sanders. Now, before we get into the spin, I'm going to ask you, dear viewer, what is the cultural footprint of the Rings of Power outside of the fans absolutely hating it? Where are the Reddit threads? Where are the 2-hour theory videos on how you can create Mordor in an afternoon? Where are the first black female dwarf who wasn't the first black female dwarf Disa theories? Where are the Don Lemonless character breakdowns? Where are the Guy Ladriel cosplayers who aren't paid to do it? Where are the Durin the Third and Elrond shippers? Oh, I don't want to know the answer to that question. I really don't.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw. Don't!
I've got some theories. How about with Celeborn? You know, Galadriel's husband, the character that JD Payne and Patrick McKay left out of the series because they didn't want to rob Guy Ladriel of her agency.
Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
When they inevitably bring him back, I have a few theories. He was either held prisoner for like 1,000 years and he has PTSD and the far more capable Guy Ladriel has to nurse him back to health, or he was back home babysitting Celebrian for 1,000 years. No, wait. Guy Ladriel will meet him later while she's training more Numenorians, you know, the greatest warriors in Middle-earth, and he'll be her squire. Where is the anticipation for season 2 outside of content creators like yours truly? Amazon seems to have forgotten what they paid for. The built-in audience. You know, the men and women that they called racist and sexist before the show even came out and then called patently evil. Salk, who is quoted in the story, claimed that 250 million households across the entire globe receive Prime Video because of their Prime memberships, but we don't know how many active viewers there are. It's unclear how Amazon tracks Prime Video viewers as opposed to its overall Prime subscription model, but the company last reported it as 200 million subscribers in 2021. Since they've already been caught telling multiple lies, why would anybody believe anything this woman says? Salk also claimed that The Rings of Power was a success in the story, saying that the desire to paint the show as anything less than a success, it's not reflective of any conversations I'm having internally. What, in your head? Hate to break this to you, sweetheart. You are surrounded by a bunch of yes men and women, and you have a little leakage problem. Turns out a lot of people who used to work for Jennifer Salk and currently work for Jennifer Salk have a lot of problems with the way she's doing things, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But again, I have to acknowledge that the only thing people are talking about when it concerns the Rings of Power is its absolute failure and Amazon's lies. If you really think about it, it should be obvious. Even internally, Amazon knows that they lost 2/3 of their audience during season 1. How many people do you think are going to come back for a season 2 that they have to wait 2 years for, and it's written by the same people? And yes, guilty as charged. I'm not going to miss an opportunity to expose Amazon's lies when it comes to the Rings of Power. That being said, there is something we need to take a look at as it concerns the bigger picture and why our favorite franchises continue to fail and the people producing them continue to refuse to see it. And believe it or not, because I can't, it comes from the Access Media's The Hollywood Reporter. Props to Kim Masters for writing, dare I say, a really good article and a complete takedown of Jennifer Salk. Inside Amazon Studios' big swings hampered by confusion and frustration. Despite ambitious bets like Daisy Jones and the Six and the upcoming Citadel, insiders complain that there's still no vision for what an Amazon Prime show is. But Chief Jen Salk says they are missing the point. You don't reverse engineer true creative vision.
What the f are you talking about, man?
What? You don't reverse engineer true creative vision? Then what the hell is your explanation with the Rings of Power? You went way beyond reverse engineering. You mutilated it. You violated the professor's work. And I certainly hope you weren't referring to the bad reboot disciple showrunners of the Rings of Power, JD Payne and Patrick McKay, who called the Lord of the Rings fans patently evil, who prior to The Rings of Power, after 10 years in Hollywood, had one partial credit on one bad script that was a bad Star Trek movie. Anyway, let's find out from the people who used to work for Amazon and still work for Amazon why The Rings of Power is such an unbelievable disaster, because you think they would notice this, and in turn, we might get an explanation as to why Disney Star Wars, Kurtzman Trek, Doctor Who, the MCU, and I really could go on, are abysmal failures that they refuse to see. It's been an open secret that Jeff Bezos has yearned for his own Game of Thrones, and that Amazon's big swing as it reached for its own massive hit was The Rings of Power, believed to be the most expensive series ever made, and it was. Last September, the show began with a bang, delivering the biggest debut ever on the streamer, according to Amazon, in what Amazon Studios chief Jennifer Salk called a very culturally defining moment for the company. It was just not the one you intended. When season 1 wrapped, the show was less defining than hoped, falling short of being the breakout hit that Amazon had envisioned.
Yeah, no Sherlock.
You know what's funny is the fans figured this out a good year before the show was coming out based on everything Amazon told us, and the focus groups that they paid thousands of dollars for couldn't. Many current and former Amazon executives, as well as showrunners who have series at the streamer and agents who make deals there, believe that this is no accident. They describe Amazon Studios as a confusing and frustrating place to do business when it comes to movies, where Amazon's footprint is expanding following the $8.5 billion acquisition of MGM a year ago. A veteran producer says that in recent years, there has been no sense of what the philosophy is. And on the television side, executives and showrunners who are currently working at Amazon have no idea what Jennifer Salk or the head of Amazon Television, Vernon Sanders, want. A showrunner with ample experience at the studio says there's no vision for what an Amazon Prime show is. You can't say they stand for this kind of storytelling. It's completely random what they make and how they make it. Another showrunner with multiple series at Amazon finds it baffling that the streamer hasn't had more success. Amazon has more money than God, this person says. If they wanted to produce unbelievable television, they certainly have the resources to do it. Or do they? Hang in there, there is an explanation. And what's the Kathleen Kennedy of Amazon, Jennifer Salk's response? Everything's fine. They have no idea what they're talking about. And this is where we get the quote, "You don't reverse engineer true creative vision," except when it comes to Tolkien and Wheel of Time. I got you, Robert Jordan fans. And here is the big and legitimate concern for Hollywood right now. The question that makes many in Hollywood nervous is whether the Amazon studio overlords in Seattle believe they are getting enough bang for their mega bucks. The last thing the industry wants at a time of belt tightening is a cutback on spending from a deep-pocketed buyer. Hollywood does indeed have a lot to worry about: the economic downturn and the Writers Guild deciding to strike, possibly during this economic downturn. And the two biggest players in Hollywood right now aren't even in Hollywood: Apple and Amazon. They are using movie studios basically as giant vanity projects to drive traffic to their retail websites. And when they realize someday that this isn't actually making them any money, one or two might pull the plug, and that will be disastrous for Tinseltown. Don't believe me? It says it right here. Like Apple, Amazon is not a traditional entertainment company, but a huge retailer with a side hustle in Hollywood. Amazon's view is that the more hours you spend watching Prime Video, the more likely you are to renew your membership and the more likely you are to shop on the site. Now, this is a very long article that I'm not going to go over entirely, but we'll hit some highlights. But if you do want to know the ins and outs of why some of your favorite intellectual properties are failing, outside of mentioning activism, which I will, this is worth the read. Now, there is a lot of former and current Amazon employees saying essentially the same thing. There is no direction. They don't know what they want. And if you can't get direction, you can't have the trust of your creatives. And then there's the money. Just like Amazon tried to buy their way into the Tolkien fandom, they're trying to buy their way into Hollywood. Here are just a few examples of Amazon showing the budgetary restraint of your average cokehead in Vegas. Hunters and A League of Their Own, which is ending with a truncated season 2, no surprise there, stand out as expensive disappointments of the Sulk era. The latter cost in the ballpark of $90 million. They spent $90 million on A League of Their Own for 8 episodes, including a premium paid to Sony for certain rights. Then there's the Russo brothers' Citadel, a show you probably haven't heard of. Sources say the cost of the series climbed towards $300 million, making it Amazon's second most expensive show after The Rings of Power. Here's where we get a major revelation. Now, honestly, it's one that we knew, but it's nice to hear confirmation. Amazon recently renewed The Peripheral, based on the William Gibson novel, the guy who coined the phrase cyberpunk, a sci-fi drama from Jonah Nolan and Lisa Joy, the showrunners from Westworld, a show that was just recently canceled with no resolution, I would argue 3 seasons too late. That cost close to $175 million for 8 episodes. Amazon has ordered 6 additional hours of The Peripheral, despite what sources say has been a lukewarm audience engagement, and I think that's being very generous. Has anybody seen it? Does anybody care? It probably should have been canceled, says an insider, but they made a mega deal, and the political capital they would lose with Lisa and Jonah would be too great. And there you have your explanation as to why Kathleen Kennedy has stuck around so long despite being an abysmal failure as the head of Lucasfilm. Political capital. Same goes for Alex Kurtzman, believe it or not. Same goes for Chris Chibnall sticking around at the BBC for so long. That's why they're forging ahead with a Rings of Power Season 2. Ego and hubris, but that is a big part of the problem, but it only remains a part. You want to keep your job in Hollywood? Don't deliver bad news, and if the fans start complaining, just call them racist. The article also mentions Amazon's over-reliance on focus groups and test scores. Another thing this article repeats a lot is insiders saying that Jen Salk tends to be a trend chaser. She searches for what's hot without doing much investigation, something, of course, is denied, but then we get this. But a showrunner with considerable experience at Amazon sees it differently. They don't learn from their mistakes. They say, we can't do deals like that. You turn around and they're right back to it. The impolite term is star f***ing. And the one thing this article doesn't mention is Jennifer Salk has a background in marketing, and it's through the marketing we get the activism. There seems to be much more focus on the buildup to the show and creating conversations through saying things like first female dwarf or first black male elf, which neither were true, or the female empowerment of turning Galadriel into a dude. And there's less focus on the actual storytelling or adapting and respecting Professor Tolkien, #respect for Tolkien. And the only thing that really matters to Amazon about Professor Tolkien's beautiful secondary world is making a product to drive customers to their product instead of, I don't know, telling a good story which would have driven people to your products. And they're finding it very difficult to make a popular product when they don't understand the story they bought, all while ignoring why people like The Lord of the Rings and the people who like The Lord of the Rings. You had the roadmap, Jennifer Salk, even though you did just have the appendices. They were there, and you and your team completely ignored them. And you want to know why? Jennifer Salk has never read The Lord of the Rings and never will. And that's why it's no surprise, according to consumer intelligence research partners, Amazon's US Prime subscribers stalled last year at 168 million, essentially flat from 2021. So Amazon and Jeff Bezos or whoever's in charge, save your money on all those focus groups. There's plenty of YouTube channels willing to tell you the truth, and I'll tell you the truth right now. Take Jennifer Salk's salary and all the budget from the Rings of Power and set it on fire. That would be a better use. At least it would keep somebody warm. And you could take this to the bank. As sure as the sun will rise in the east and set in the west, as sure as Disney will do something stupid within the next week. The Rings of Power Season 2 will be another giant flop. Only a fraction of that 37% that managed to hang on for Season 1 will return, and I'm here for it. Because guess what? No one wants to see identity politics and intersectional feminism in Lord of the Rings. But you did pull off one thing. You managed to adapt the most expensive television show of all time, a timeless tale, and make it dated. And the year of vindicated fandom continues. So smoke them if you got them, take that victory lap, tip a drink to yourself, give yourself some applause, Tolkien fandom, because you were the one group of fans that stood up and said no, and your victory was absolute. And thank you for showing the beloved professor and his son Christopher more respect than their own family. To sum things up simply, The Rings of Power was a flop, and the Tolkien fandom is undefeated. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, thanks for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com.
Cast it into the fire!